One of the hardest things I've had to learn in business is actually how to say no properly. Not a polite sort of yes or a polite no, not a maybe later, but a firm, proper no. And so today I want to talk to you about how walking away from some of my deals has actually created more value for me than some of the deals I've actually done. And interestingly, most of the time, it's come down to one thing, something we all kind of undervalue, which is your gut instinct. So I guess here's the question. Why is it so difficult to say no? I suppose most founders, me included, start by wanting to say yes. Yes to opportunities, yes to introductions, yes to partnerships, yes to anything that kind of might help the business grow. But what no one tells you early on is that saying yes to the wrong thing is far more expensive than saying no. A bad partnership, for example, can drain your time. A bad investor can drain your energy. A bad deal kind of drains your focus. And, that to me is one of your most valuable and my most valuable currencies. We underestimate in some ways the long tail and the long term problems that a bad decision can make in the business. Because the short term temptations of saying yes are always louder. So here's 4 classic red flags on when I think you need to think of the word no. You've got a deal in front of you, and any of these 4 things happen, you need to rethink. The first thing is when the numbers and the economics of a deal look great, but the alignment and the chemistry between the parties just doesn't feel right. The reality is economics can really help a business, but the relationship, the chemistry, the alignment on the direction of the business or whatever it is that the deal is brokering is super important. That misalignment will always cost you more than money in the longer term. The second red flag is really analyzing, does this deal only solve a short-term problem, but possibly it could create a longer-term problem in the future? And when we talked about alignment a second ago, that's one of the things you need to think about. It might be the distance between the parties. It might be the type of relationship that you have. But this is a classic trap that I've fallen into in the past, where you take a deal because short term it solves a cash problem or it solves a partnership problem. But then you get the chaos tomorrow, the week after, the month after. And whilst short term survival is super important and obviously critical to the business, it should never come at the expense of the long-term health of the business. The third red flag is, what is your gut instinct telling you? If your gut instinct says no, follow it before your brain finds excuses. And we all know we have this little person on our shoulder that tries to rationalize a deal, gives you all the upside, tells you it sounds like a fantastic deal, but this niggle inside of you is saying, this doesn't feel right. And I've always now, and increasingly I'm following my gut instinct. If I have a good feeling, I'm generally right. My gut instinct is generally right. So do follow your gut instinct. And the fourth red flag is to kind of look at the future a bit and see, does this deal force you to become a version of yourself that you don't want to be? And again, I've been in situations where I've looked ahead and thought to myself, I'm possibly getting into bed financially with someone that I'm going to end up having to change my character a bit. And I've never wanted to do that. I've always wanted to be who I am. And so if a partnership or an investor or a business colleague compromises your values, your morals, your product, your brand, that price is too high. Even if the check is big, think about those principles of who you are. And so those are the 4 simple red flags at an early stage that you need to look at when a deal is on the table. So let's talk for a second about gut instinct, because it's really important. People always say, trust your gut. But what does that actually mean? In some ways, your gut is not irrational. It's a kind of accumulation of all your scars, all your experience, every mistake, every positive experience you've had, every intuition you've developed over your life, and whether that's in business or not, from years of experience of running your business or creating your ideas. So your gut is not irrational. In some ways, data kind of tells you what has happened in the past, and your gut perhaps is telling you what is going to happen in the future. And so I guess the best decisions come from a balance of the two. Get the good data, look at the assessment of the economics, find out what the data is telling you, but also what is your gut telling you. And a balance between those two is probably the right decision. Let me talk to you about a recent deal that I didn't do and I said no to. It was a difficult decision, but one that I think in hindsight was probably the right decision. Recently, as part of running a fashion business, I got approached by a major Hollywood celebrity, an actress, who wanted to endorse our product and offered really good terms, albeit a lot of money, to become an ambassador for our product. On paper, the economics looked pretty interesting. This person had millions of followers on social media, had really good engagement, and probably on paper could also rejuvenate our brand. However, the issue really was a couple of things. Firstly, my instinct and my gut was telling me there's something missing here. This deal feels possibly too good to be true. Secondly, the sheer economics of the deal were huge. In other words, I needed to raise quite a lot of money to do the transaction. And thinking about it, if it didn't work, the risk to the business was quite high that we would offload a lot of cash out of the business, produce a lot of stock to support the partnership, and it might risk the long-term viability of the business. And so ultimately, whilst the deal and transaction looked fantastic on paper, A-list Hollywood celebrity representing the business, becoming an ambassador, the risks and the downside, and my gut were telling me something's missing here. So eventually I said no to the deal and walked away. Now, ultimately, I'll never know what might or might not have happened if the deal went through. But I did feel I probably made the right decision, not risking the business, not outlaying so much money for what could be a huge success or possibly a huge flop. And on that basis, I made the decision not to do it and say no. Under those circumstances, a great example of being able to say no, a proper no, not stringing people along, but just rationalizing it, giving feedback to the agent on the other side and explaining why, and they understood. But that's a good example of sort of rationalizing data where this person had sponsored other people and there was some decent data, but the economics married with my gut instinct made me say no to that deal. And it was a tough one. But it's something that perhaps is a good example of sort of marrying data with gut instinct. So I guess if you're a founder, an operator, perhaps somebody just navigating big decisions, kind of ask yourself before you say yes, what's my gut telling me on these decisions? Let's marry it with the data. Make sure that that gut instinct is part of the decision making. Say fewer yeses, say the right yeses, and don't be afraid to walk away. I hope you've enjoyed this. Drop a comment about a deal or a situation where you've walked away and perhaps where you've never regretted it, or perhaps you have regretted it. But anyway, thanks for watching, and catch up with you guys soon.